Bertha!
Next time, I'll be revisiting... What's going on? Looks like next time, I'll be going ghost.
He's a phantom.
There were perfect things, diamond videos, but things fall. I filmed that outro weeks ago, but if I knew then what I knew now, I would have done things differently. And what falls is fallen. In the dream, they took me to the light. Light here meaning the Batman movie I've always dreamed about ever since I first picked up the first issue of the New 52, but that's beside the point. It was all a beautiful lie. Okay. I was shooting for Christian Bale, but that might have actually been closer to Filthy Frank. I'm sorry about that. Love him or hate him, Warner Brothers DC movies have been in pretty dire straits since 2011. Green Lantern was supposed to start a cinematic universe, but it bombed critically and financially. The Dark Knight Rises was the end of Christopher Nolan's critically acclaimed standalone Batman series. And Man of Steel was a bit too much for some people.
Daddy, chill.
Man of Steel dividing audiences may have seemed like a good thing at the time, as it created the controversy needed to put people in seats, but in the long run, it had an incredibly negative outcome. Zack, worship at his feet or irrationally hate him as a person there is no middle ground, Snyder, had a vision. It could be, and is currently being debated endlessly down in the terrifying deepest depths of Twitter, whether his vision was good or not. I'm not here to discuss that at all. What is clear, though, is that his vision was manipulated by Warner Brothers following mixed reception to Man of Steel. Batman vs. Superman is evidence of this, with its attempts to skip past the story Snyder had envisioned to set up a whole lot of Justice League films. Suicide Squad, while not Snyder's film, is evidence of this with its attempts to be DC's Guardians of the Galaxy. And most of all, Justice League is evidence of this.
Yeah. Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
As a result, we've only gotten 2 films, not counting the Lego Batman movie, in the last 6 years that have not been received poorly critically and financially. 2017's Wonder Woman and last year's Aquaman. Shazam's about a month and a half out right now, and looks to be pretty promising, especially with director David F. Sandberg's enthusiasm for the project. But a bit of news came out in about June of last year that really caught me off guard. Warner Brothers announced Wonder Woman 1984. Several bits of information just didn't line up about this movie, especially the return of Steve Trevor. Steve was last seen crashing a plane of explosives in the Arctic to save the world and the woman he loves. I mean, Steve was last seen blowing up in a plane full of explosives to save the world and the woman he loves. There's talk that Pedro Pascal's character is Hades and will resurrect Trevor for Diana, but with Affleck and Cavill out of their respective roles, the wheels started turning in my head for how Wonder Woman 1984 could actually reboot the entire DCEU for the better. After years of Warner Brothers and DC being accused of riding Marvel's coattails and trying to replicate their success, I finally saw what DC could do to differentiate themselves from Marvel, and where DC could or should go in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts. I'd like to propose to you that starting with Wonder Woman 1984, the DCEU should primarily be set in the neon-drenched 1980s. I know one of the first things to pop into your head. But wait, some of these characters had movies coming out in the 1980s. Yeah, I know. But think about just how much the world has changed in the 30 or 40 years since then. Batman couldn't just pull up a Tony Stark AI robot to solve his problems. He'd have modems and monitors hooked up that looked hilarious to us nowadays, but would function as the real computers in the Batcave back then. The Daily Planet would make sense as a place to work because newspaper wasn't almost completely dead yet. And with 80s nostalgia still gripping the nation, it just makes sense to associate those positive emotions with DC's many varied projects. I mean, they're literally doing it with Wonder Woman now anyway, so why not extend it to the rest of the Justice League? Now, in this video, I'll detail out a proposed, short, concise roadmap that I've dreamt up for how the movies could go after that. It's clear DC wants to stay solo for a bit due to the success of Wonder Woman and Aquaman, so most of these will be solo projects, but I'm still banking on them leading to a rebooted Justice League project at some point in the future. I'm not really going to get into casting, because that usually just devolves into who can shout Scott Adkins as Batman the loudest. But also, I believe in waiting until the film is out to judge a performance. I'll be mostly focusing on broad strokes of how the film should feel and a general plot synopsis. Maybe in the future I'll go in and flesh out some of the ideas I have in here, but for now, let's get started. Okay, I'm not even gonna pretend to fathom how Wonder Woman 1984 goes. Although it's safe to say that Barbara Minerva will be Cheetah by the end, and will be introduced to either Maxwell Lord or Hades depending on who Pedro Pascal is playing. Up next after Wonder Woman 1984, I think we'll see Matt Reeves' Batman film, which for the purposes of this video, we'll call Batman Eternal. You'll see this crop up a few more times throughout this video, but one of my favorite things that Marvel does is name films after famous comic book arcs, but then create completely new stories using multiple arcs as inspiration. One thing that this Batman film needs to nail is making Gotham City feel like a character. Sure, make the population likable and memorable, but more than anything, make the city itself feel unique and interesting. The Christopher Nolan movies created a more realistic Gotham, which worked, but I'm looking for something that's halfway between the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher films, hence the 80s setting I suggested for these movies. A sprawling gothic landscape drenched in bright pinks, purples, and yellows from the neon signs hanging from every storefront. The rain coming down on the bright blue GCPD sign as another Batman rogue is taken in. Red light pouring out from the entrance to Arkham Asylum. Honestly, just make step one get a fantastic cinematographer like Roger Deakins or Linus Sandgren. And as for the 80s aesthetic, just imagine it. Bruce Wayne sulky around Wayne Manor in turtlenecks. Dick and Barbara going to an aesthetic nightclub. Two-Face being that version of himself that's got a purple side of his face and super bright clothes. And Damian Wayne singing the Zelda rap.
It's the Legend of Zelda and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad.
But if you want a specific movie it should aspire to be like, I'd say Blade Runner. Tone down some of the futuristic elements and just have Batman saying zoom enhance on a picture to catch crooks. Also, blue and gray costume. I think it's finally time. I think everyone's a little tired of the Joker at this point. He showed up and made himself the main villain in every Arkham game, and then in Suicide Squad.
What the hell is even that?
So if they want to do the Joker again, I'd say lay more into the fun side of him. The Dark Knight set this precedent that Joker is, above all, psychotic and frightening. But when I think of the Joker, I imagine the animated series. Remember that time Joker threw a funeral for Batman because he thought he died and gave a whole goofy eulogy? That's fantastic. I want to see a Joker closer to that. I haven't watched Gotham since season 2, but from what I've heard, Cameron Monaghan's Joker, or Jeremiah, or whoever he's playing, is the best live-action Joker not named Heath Ledger. He seems to embrace all facets of the character, from the goofy, fun-loving trickster to the psychotic killer, and none of the emo pimp who's supposed to be, I don't know, attractive or something? In all of his on-screen adaptations, Batman's been missing one massive part of his storied history. Something that is so crucial, I'm shocked we haven't seen them more yet. His family. No, not the chalk outline ones. But Dick Grayson, Barbara Gordon, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, maybe but hopefully not Damian Wayne, Luke Fox, Kate Kane, even though it would be hard now that she and Luke are going to be on the CW, and more. It's an unspoken rule that everyone wants a grounded noir detective story for Batman, and I believe you could easily do that with the Bat family. Have the rogues there, especially ones that haven't had a chance to shine on the big screen yet, but turn the conflict directly inwards. Maybe it could be an adaptation of Hush where Jason gets more involved. We learn about the backstory of the Robins as they come together to essentially settle a family squabble with Jason, who's still upset about that time Joker played his ribs like a xylophone with a crowbar. I'm sorry, I'm a massive Red Hood fanboy, and I really want to see him on the big screen one of these days. He deserves it about as much as Nightwing in my opinion. This could be DC and Batman's Spider-Verse. A great team-up that introduces several palatable leads who will then go on to lead their own features in the future. In my opinion, that's been one of DC's greatest mistakes lately. Maybe it's just my circle of friends, but when I talk to people about DC, we're always talking about Batman, Nightwing, Red Hood, Red Robin, or Batgirl. DC wants a Justice League, but the Bat Family seems to be DC's most popular venture in the comics, so why not just adapt all of them and have the Bat Family be the team-up film? And again, give me my Red Hood movie. Please. Maybe make it Red Hood and the Outlaws with Roy, Artemis, and Bizarro, and let James Gunn direct that one. Speaking of James Gunn, Suicide Squad 2. I think I've made it known before that I just don't really care about the Suicide Squad in general. Deadshot and Deathstroke are cool, but Harley Quinn is so oversaturated right now in all DC projects that it genuinely feels like she's DC's Deadpool. That being said, I think a Suicide Squad set in the 1980s could be like Predator, with the squad dropped into a war-torn country to solve a problem only to be attacked by metahumans on the way out. It's a fight for survival, with over-the-top macho men and badass Ellen Ripley-esque women all firing over-the-top massive guns into the jungle. As for the metahumans, maybe the whole story could take place in Santa Prisca, with Bane's team of mercenaries being the initial targets, but then Bane starts hunting each member of the squad through the jungle. I'm talking venom-infused Bane here, none of that bodybuilder stuff. Let's get Arkham wacky with this version and just make him an unusually large but still tactical brute. I know I started this section by saying I don't care about the Suicide Squad, but now I'm kinda really interested in this idea. It could be a lot of fun. As for the roster, I feel like Deadshot's a given. It'd be a shame to waste Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke at this point, so throw him in there too. I'm gonna leave out Harley because she's gonna be in the Birds of Prey for some reason, and I feel like some other DC female anti-heroes deserve the spotlight. Like Killer Frost, or even if they find a way to bring back Enchantress and make her more like her Injustice 2 appearance than the Suicide Squad one. For the rest of the team, there could be a lot of expendable but likable anti-heroes akin to the role Slipknot played in the first Suicide Squad. Bane slowly picks everyone off until the last group is left and they have to tactically take down Bane. James, you're one of, if not my favorite filmmaker. Hear my plea. This is my pitch for Suicide Squad 2. Do it! Before I talk about Birds of Prey, I feel like there's one crucial movie missing from Warner Brothers' release schedule that needs to happen. Another Superman movie. Batman has become the poster boy for DC in recent years, but Superman is the superhero. I can't imagine a DC universe without him, so I would suggest starting with a movie called All-Star Superman. Since Cavill's mostly out of the DCEU, this would be with a whole new cast, who are almost going through the motions at this point. Everyone knows their place, until Lex Luthor starts doing Lex Luthor things. You know, the usual trying to figure out a way to kill Superman, maybe even take his powers and force Superman into a corner where he has to think himself out. It could confront 80s Reagan-era nationalism, as Superman tries to be a symbol for a country that has become more obsessed with capitalism than actual truth, justice, and the old American way. Make Superman conflicted without making him too moody. Even in the face of seemingly impossible odds, the Man of Tomorrow, who always seems to make the impossible happen, can still crack wise, just like the other red and blue clothed hero from across the way.
Spider-Wars!
Not to that extent, but a cheerier Superman is always appreciated. If we could get to the point where great Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman films are all on the big screen at the same time, I would lose my nerdy little mind. As for how the 80s aesthetics would play into this movie, I can picture something along the lines of RoboCop with a mix of action and political satire. Superman can essentially be a pawn of the US government, like in The Dark Knight Returns, and doesn't realize how bad things are until Luthor comes into a position of power and starts using Superman however he wants in foreign countries across the world. But unlike The Dark Knight Returns, Superman himself will see the problems with this, and fight against authority like the hero he is. Think of this one as RoboCop meets the Winter Soldier. For Birds of Prey, I think they've got a pretty good thing going on right now. Ewan McGregor is a fantastic choice for Black Mask, although I fear his star power will keep him out of the mask for a majority of the movie. And Ramona Flowers herself as Huntress is a great choice. That being said, I find it really weird not having Barbara Gordon involved in some way. She doesn't have to be Oracle, she could suit up as Batgirl alongside them and fight Black Mask. Black Canary looks good,
I don't think I'm familiar with the actress, so I'll have to see her performance before I make any calls on that. But Harley Quinn? She still needs some work done before I'm on board with her. Margot Robbie is a terrific actress when she's given a good role. I, Tonya is one of my favorite movies of the last couple years, mostly because of her great performance. I'm confident that Christina Hodson will give her a bit more to do this time around, and hopefully won't make her a meme lord regurgitating stuff like,
Harley Quinn, nice to meet ya. Love your perfume. What is that? The scent of death?
For the 80s aesthetic, I'd go for something along the lines of Big Trouble in Little China. Give a part of Gotham or Bloodhaven some real character to it, just a couple streets or a city block that the Birds of Prey operate on that Black Mask is now causing a lot of trouble on. And now they have to slowly infiltrate and stop Black Mask and his gang, who could consist of some of the weirder mystical parts of DC. Or maybe he's made a pact with the League of Assassins and they want Cassandra Cain, who's been shown to be in the movie, so it would be Badass Girls vs. Ninjas, the movie. I'd buy out a whole theater for that. A couple more movies before I get into the deep cuts that I'd love to see in this hypothetical slate of films. Next up, The Flash, or in this case, The Flash Rebirth. Much like the next entry I'll talk about, and the Bat Family before, this should be a movie whose cast is rounded out by the family of superheroes associated with the character. The CW kinda gets this, having Jay Garrick stop in from time to time, and they had Wally West play a pretty big role for a while. But I'm talking having Wally, Jay, Bart, Iris, Jesse, and Max Mercury all going around solving crimes and taking down baddies together. This one definitely has the capacity to be more of an Ant-Man style comedy, but I'd lean a little more into Honey, I Shrunk the Kids mixed with the Road Warrior for it. That's the craziest sentence that's ever left my mouth. What I mean is, have the kind of wacky, fun science jargon humor and playfulness of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but with some of the more serious Western elements of the Road Warrior, as Barry fights to protect Central City from either the Rogues or Reverse Flash. Maybe Captain Cold is holding Central City hostage until he can find some medical help for his sister, with the help of Mirror Master, Heatwave, and Weather Wizard. Whereas my hypothetical Batman Eternal movie would be about reconciliation within a family, this film could be about two fully formed families going head to head, and the moral choices Barry would have to make to keep his together while stopping the Rogues' crime wave. Okay, I really want a good Green Lantern movie. I know there's a lot of Hal Jordan hate out there for the stuff he did in the 80s, 90s, and pretty much any time he's been the whiniest Justice League member, but he's always been my favorite Green Lantern. So let's call this one Green Lantern Emerald Dawn, after one of my favorite Green Lantern and also one of my favorite DC arcs I own. They already tried the MCU route in 2011's Green Lantern, so this time let's just throw everyone in there. And I mean everyone. Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart, Guy Gardner, Star Sapphire, Kilowog, Sinestro, Atrocitus, Larfleeze, Jessica Cruz, Alan Scott, Simon Baz, Kyle Rayner, Saint Walker, Ganthet, and more. I think what Green Lantern needs is a good Star Wars sci-fi fantasy formula. Maybe there's some MacGuffin to get on the edge of the universe, and it requires that they all travel to different Lantern planets along the way, and pick up more friends from each one that they go to. Since every story needs a point of view character for the audience, have fan favorite Kyle Rayner join the team just as the story begins, and have it be about his journey to become the White Lantern. End it with a spectacular battle between all of the Lantern Corps fighting in space, either in a colorful asteroid belt or near a black hole or supernova. I can just imagine all the colors flying across the screen now. Basically imagine the footage we've seen from Captain Marvel, but with 24 Captain Marvels flying all over the place, and sorry. Now, we've come to the place that Warner Brothers and DC were at a few years back, the Justice League. How do you tackle everything in such a limited amount of time? How do you tie up so much buildup and introduce new characters while still keeping true to the comics? I have an absolutely ridiculous answer. Bear in mind, everything, including what I'm about to say, are all just ideas that I've had. I'm not suggesting they do any of this, these are literally ideas I think would be cool to see executed on the big screen. Or, in this case, the small screen. When they get to that point, I believe the Justice League should be a mini-series akin to how they're releasing the final season of Game of Thrones. 6 or 7 feature-length episodes with a cinematic feel to them, where everything is wrapped up from all the previous stories while opening possibilities for all the characters involved going forward. This series should be everyone coming together to fight Darkseid, who should be just as much of a terrifying presence as Thanos. If you really wanted to, you could hint at Darkseid in everything until this series, really showing him off in a Green Lantern movie because they'd already be in space near where he is. Oh no. After all this time, I've slipped right back into making DC like Marvel. So, then, how do you differentiate DC from Marvel? What is the final big thing that should be different? I actually do have an answer to that. And I'm not the first person to think this one up. Skip Darkseid. Have him show up if you want to, but don't tease him to be the big bad. Instead, do what countless other channels have suggested. A feat so massive, and strange, and unwieldy, there's no way Marvel would even fathom trying something similar. Crisis on Infinite Earths. This could be it. The thing that finally brings the DC cinematic universe into its own. Imagine all of the different movies up until that point, all the characters that have been established thus far, coming together to take down the Anti-Monitor. I know Arrow and Flash are already setting that up for this fall, but imagine if this was a threat so big that literally everyone in this new universe is brought together to stop the oncoming threat. Those League of Assassins ninjas, they're joined up with the Bat family and the Birds of Prey. The Lanterns all find a way to compromise in the name of keeping themselves alive. Maybe most of the show is getting someone like Sinestro or Atrocitus on board, and they come in Han Solo style to save the day at the last second. The remaining members of the Suicide Squad are working with the Rogues and Team Flash on a way to stop the Anti-Monitor and his fleet. It doesn't just stop there. Have the characters from Titans or Arrow or Flash or any of the other shows show up as the multiverses collide. It's a mini-series that feels like 6 or 7 movies rolled into one. Again, this is absolutely insane, but there's no doubt it would be a massive step for Warner Brothers and DC to take. Some other movies I'd definitely like to see in the future are a Guillermo del Toro produced Justice League Dark, with Swamp Thing, Etrigan, and Constantine, of course. I haven't read enough Cyborg to know if he'd be able to carry his own movie, but people seem to really want him to have a solo movie, so here's hoping that that happens. I can see that almost being like a short circuit kind of movie. The government or Argus or Star Labs or someone wants him back and he's running away with new friends. A Booster Gold and Blue Beetle movie would be great, and even though the comparison may seem obvious, I'd want it in a Bill and Ted style of them going through DC's history and doing, I don't know, stuff. The villain could be Vandal Savage, who's sick of them messing up his day every time they go back and do something. And that's all I can think about right now. Wait a second! Shazam! Shazam actually helped me come up with the 80s aesthetic because of how much Sandberg has insisted the movie is an homage to Big. A few changes here and there, like Shazam charging the phones, and the movie could easily take place in the hypothetical 80s DC universe. I don't think I say it enough, but I love DC. Right now I'm on an incredible Marvel high because of things like Infinity War, Spider-Man PS4, Into the Spider-Verse,
I am the Bomb Squad,
and the Nick Spencer Spidey run. But DC got me into comics in the first place. If I hadn't picked up The Dark Knight Returns, I wouldn't have been interested to see what other adventures Batman had been on outside the movies. And I never would have found Red Hood, who might be my favorite comic book character. I'll always have the comics, the Tim Burton and Christopher Nolan movies, and the Arkham and Injustice games, but I'm really excited to see DC's future right now. They deserve to share some of that limelight with Marvel, and I feel like their time is coming, sooner than you can say, Shazam! Thanks for joining me on this hypothetical look at DC's future, and a special thanks to channels like Nando V Movies and Captain Midnight for inspiring me to do something like this. Go check them out. Like the video if you liked it, comment below if you like any of the ideas I've presented, or have any more that you'd want to see happen in the future, and share this video around. See you real soon!